So the question that we're now asking is, how did it all begin? Where does Israel come from, and how did the states of Israel and Judah develop? Okay, so let's ask first, what is the first historical reference to Israel outside the Bible? That is, what is the first reference to the name Israel explicitly in a text that is in Egypt, Mesopotamia, wherever? And many of you may know the answer to this question already. The date is about 1200 BC, and the place where it was discovered, the text, is the town of Thebes, way down in southern Egypt, about 800 kilometers south of the Mediterranean coast. Now, before I describe this remarkable reference to Israel, I want to point out that we have much older Egyptian texts that mention the names of places that would become important towns in Israel's history. These are the names of places in Canaan. Israel had not yet developed, but in Canaan, southern Canaan, and that will endure for many centuries thereafter in the time of the biblical kings and so forth. So one source for these references is the execration text, dating to Egypt's 12th dynasty, that is about the 19th century BC. The execration texts are really fascinating, really fascinating. Some are on pottery shards, like broken pieces of pottery, and others are on figurines. And as a kind of sympathetic magic, the names of the enemies of the individual peoples, places, whatever, in this case the towns of Canaan, were written upon these objects, and then they were ceremonially destroyed as curses were pronounced over their names and crashed down. The idea is that the ritual and the curse would ensure that these Canaanite towns would not pose a threat to the Egyptian ruler, and one did that through this curse and through these ceremonies. You might be thinking of similar practices when you hear about this that you know of in other cultures from other times and places. And if you do, please mention them in the discussion. I would love to hear about them. So one of these execration texts mentions the word Rushalim. And some scholars identify it with the name Jerusalem. Jerusalem in Hebrew is Yerushalayim, and Rushalim and Yerushalayim do sound similar. Others, however, are not convinced by this reading, so we shouldn't make too much of it. So what's interesting for our course is the context of these first references to important towns from the land of the Bible. And the context is defeat and curses calling for the destruction of these places and their inhabitants. It's quite fascinating. Now, a second corpus of Egyptian texts mentions places we know from the Bible as well. And this corpus is, in fact, our most important source of knowledge for activities in Canaan in the period directly before the many historical changes that gave rise to the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. We call these texts the Amana Letters, after the town of El Armana in southern Egypt, the Amana Letters. It was there that this guy, the English Egyptologist and archaeologist Sir Flinders Petrie, found a collection of about 350 letters. The year was 1887. And in these letters, several Egyptian rulers, from Amenhotep III to King Tut, who reigned in the 14th century, correspond back and forth with powerful rulers in the areas of what are now modern Syria, Turkey, and Iraq. However, the Egyptian kings also write to their town mayors, that is, men whom they had appointed to oversee numerous towns throughout Canaan. And they're kind of their governors or in their provinces kind of thing. In their epistles to the Egyptian court, these local rulers, these mayors, in towns such as Shechem or Jerusalem, Megiddo, Gezer, Hebron, report many juicy details about their struggles with mayors in competing towns. And they're really fun to read. We'll return to them, the Amana Letters, later, since they help us imagine what would have happened when Egypt relinquished its attempt to exert control over Canaan, the land of the Bible, and they're very important for that point. So now, what about the most important reference to Israel, which was discovered at the town of Thebes? The reference is found on a royal monument victory called the Merneptah Stela. A stela is a big stone that is erected. And it's named after the Egyptian king Merneptah, who ruled until about 1203 BC. The monument is inscribed with a text, and the text is an account of this ruler's military campaign against Libya in the south of Egypt. And at the end of the text are 3 lines that treat another military campaign, this one into Canaan in the north. Now let me read for you the culmination of the section of these 3 lines as translated by Miriam Lichtheim. The princes are prostrate, saying shalom. Not one of the 9 bows lifts its head. Tehinu is vanquished, Chatti at peace. Canaan is captive with all woe. Ashkelon is conquered. Gezer seized, Yanoah made non-existent. And here, Israel is wasted, bare of seed. And then Hor is become a widow for Egypt. All who roamed about have been subdued by the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. Now, the first thing to notice is that when we examine the hieroglyphs, that is the Egyptian writing signs, we can see that Ashkelon, Gezer, and Yanoam have a marker, or what's called a determinative, that is used before cities. It's a throw stick plus 3 mountains. In contrast, the determinative, the sign, used for Israel, right before Israel, is a throw stick followed by a city man and a city woman above the plural marker, the 3 vertical lines, but it does not have the 3 mountains, as you can see here. This determinative appears before foreign peoples who are typically nomadic rather than urban. That is, they're not city dwellers. So Israel is not being noted here as a city, but rather as a people without a urban center. Okay? Now, second, what we're told about this nomadic population called Israel is that they are defeated. Literally, they are wasted. Their seed is not. Now, the word for seed, parat prat, could refer either to Israel's corn and crops, or it could be a way of describing their biological seed. Either way, the point is the same, that the Egyptian king had destroyed their means of survival. We probably should not take the phrase too literally, since the scribe was likely attempting to find a poetic way of describing conquest. It would be similar to the following line that I just read, Hor has become as a widow for Egypt. It's poetry, and the scribe is trying to find different ways of describing conquest. Thus, it would be too much to claim, as some have, that Israel is being described here as, quote, a rural or sedentary group of agriculturalists, that is, farmers, without its own urban city-state support system. This is a quote from Michael Hazel. We also cannot say where the people of Israel are located, other than that they are somewhere in the southern Levant, that is, in the land of the Bible. But even that is not for sure. They could have been in the Transjordan, what is now modern Jordan. And so we really don't even know where they're located. But what's interesting for the theme of our course, which is how Israel reinvented itself after defeat, is, number 1, the name of Israel is attested for the first time outside the Bible in an inscription from 1200 BC. Number 2, the inscription refers to Israel as a non-urban population, not yet a state, perhaps nomadic in lifestyle. And most importantly, number 3, this first reference to Israel proclaims that it has been defeated, that its seed is no longer. If this last point were taken at face value, then we could stop the course right here. But the historical facts prove to be much more complex than the monument to King Merneptah's triumph. Israel was not wiped out. It survived. And as we shall see in coming lectures, it went on to thrive and to build a state and a society that lasted for several centuries before another foreign empire destroyed it. But even then, conquest was not the final word.